Welcome, everyone. My name is Solimar Salas. I'm the Vice President for Museum Content and Programming at the Museum of Latin American Art. We welcome you today, Friday, January 22nd, 2021, to this edition of MOLAA Zoom Project, in conversation with artist Linda Vallejo, where MOLAA Chief Curator Gabriela Urtiaga will discuss the artist and her work. We also thank the Dwight Stewart Youth Fund, Rumba Foundation, Arts Council for Long Beach, and South California Edison for their constant support for the educational program at the Museum of Latin American Art. In each chapter, our chief curator places the focus on a series of specific artwork, which requires a close inspection and deliberate process of contemplation and exploration, delving into the ideas surrounding the creation of the works, their sources of research and inspiration, in an effort to immerse ourselves in the world of the artist. In Chapter 6 of MOLAA Zoom Project, we interview the multidisciplinary artist Linda Vallejo, whose work visualizes what it means to be a person of color in the United States. She states that these works reflect what she calls her brown intellectual property, the experiences, knowledge, and feelings gathered over more than 4 decades of study of Latino, Chicano, and American indigenous cultures and communities. Her most recent solo exhibitions include La Plaza de Cultura y Artes between 2019 and 2020, Kean University, Karl and Helen Burger Gallery in Union, New Jersey, and the Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach, California in 2018. PG Gallery in Santa Monica in 2017, Texas A&M University Reynolds Gallery in 2016, Bert Green Fine Arts in Chicago, Illinois, and the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center in Los Angeles, California in 2015. Her most recent solo exhibition, Brown Belongings, was also featured in the New York Times and in LA Times in 2019. Vallejo's work is in the permanent collections of the Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach, California, the Museum of Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, California, Museo del Barrio in New York, East Los Angeles College Vincent Price Museum in LA, in California, National Museum of Mexican Art, Chicago, Illinois, Carnegie Art Museum and Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County in California, UC Santa Barbara in California, the California Ethnic and Multicultural Archives in Santa Barbara, California, UCLA Chicano Study Research Center in Los Angeles, California, and the California Digital Library, Arizona State University Library Archives, among others. With this, welcome everyone. Welcome, Linda, and I'll leave with you, Gabriela Urtiaga, our Chief Curator at MOLAA.
Thank you, Solimar, and all the MOLAA team. Thank you for your introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to MOLAA. I hope you are well and safe, and thank you for joining us today. I am Gabriela Urtiaga, the Chief Curator at MOLAA, and we are so excited to present to all of you our Zoom project, chapter number 6, featuring the great artist, Linda Vallejo. Hello, Linda. Thank you so much for this meeting. Thank you for opening up your studio, your home to MOLAA and our audience.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very grateful to MOLAA and to all of the members, the board and the staff for inviting me for this wonderful day today, and welcome to my studio.
Oh, thank you, Linda. We are so pleased to have you with us today. And well, let us know, how are you doing, Linda? How are you feeling during these special and challenging times?
It's been difficult for everyone. It's lasted longer than everyone thought it would. It's been difficult emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically for everyone across the board. Families are divided. You can't see the people that you love as much as you like. I've been very fortunate to be able to spend time with my parents and my children and my grandchildren, and that's been my nucleus, and my husband, of course, in my home. I've been very happy to be in the studio. A lot of artists are in the studio working very hard, and that's what we must do during these times, is to continue to stay creative and to stay safe, and to also take this time, this important time in history, to begin developing images and ideas, concepts that begin to speak about some of the issues that we're facing during this historic era of American history.
Yeah. And Linda, I would like to invite you to start our conversation talking about your creative process, about your beginnings and artistic searches, because you can introduce us in your body of work, linking with the crucial questions about Latinx representation and identity.
I think it's important to begin by saying that my father, I was born in Boyle Heights in California. My mother was born in California as well, and my father is a retired colonel in the Air Force, Adán Cavazos Vallejo. So I traveled a great deal as a young girl throughout the world, mostly Europe and the United States. And I very much fell in love with ancient culture and traditional cultures. I traveled a great deal in Mexico and did the same thing as well. When I came back to California to get my MFA and to be with my family that I hadn't seen over many, many years, I found that the Mexicano community was my ancient culture, was my traditional culture. And I began studying it and made a dedication to Latino and Chicano culture at that time, 40 years ago. But a lot of the way that I think, a lot of the questions that I ask, a lot of the things that I'm interested in are a mixture of cultures from all over the world, with an emphasis on Europe and the United States and Mexico as a grouping. And Solimar was very kind to mention my concept of the intellectual property. If you are an artist and you've dedicated your life to any number of topics or any one or two topics, you will find that as you continue your study that the images and the ideas from that study, experience and feelings will suddenly just become pouring out in your work. And that's exactly what happened to me after seeing a great deal of work nationally, repurposed work. In 2006, I began asking this question, if you can imagine. And I asked myself, if I were to make repurposed work or appropriation, if I was to make this type of work from my cultural point of view, I wonder what it would look like. And I basically asked the question, put it in my thought process, began scouring antique malls to look for objects to repurpose, stores, all kinds of things to look for things to repurpose. And suddenly one day, the answer was given to me by seeing a Dick and Jane primer. It's a book that's read by American children. See Dick run, see Jane play, see Spot play. And all the children, I read this book as well in second grade, are blonde-haired and blue-eyed, red hair and blue-eyed. And I saw this book in an antique mall and said, oh my God, I could paint them brown. And that was the beginning of the whole idea of make them all Mexican, make them all Mexican, like this. Wow. And the pouring of this intellectual property of what it means to be brown in the United States today began just flowing out of me after many years. I didn't produce my first Make 'em All Mexican piece until 2010, late 2010, which means it took 4 years of asking this question and searching for the answer to come.
Yeah. Well, Linda, I would like to put the focus in your powerful series about symbol of women. Some of them masterpiece of the Greek culture or Victorian period, like Miam in 2010, 2015, Latinos college graduate grow by 40% from 2020, for example, which now is part of MOLAA collection. And because through your art and this appropriation, you are talking about the vast meaning of culture and brownness. Of course, the color brown, right? Yes. Can you please explain your idea and what is your experience as a Chicana artist?
This particular piece is an interesting piece. I received a question yesterday regarding the origin of this particular piece. You can imagine me going to antique malls and to secondhand stores looking for objects to repurpose. And they're very difficult to find in terms of the Latino experience. You don't find very many images regarding the Latino experience, but you find a great deal of images regarding Grecian gods, Roman gods, Egyptian gods and goddesses, and the Buddha, interestingly enough, and quite a lot of Victorian images, interestingly enough. This is sort of a picture of what I call an American picture of the great-grandmothers in the United States. You know, it's the American cultural experience in these secondhand stores. What were people collecting 50 years ago? Well, you get to see what culture actually looked like. This particular piece, we believe, is probably a remake of a Grecian goddess in the Victorian period, which is interesting because appropriation takes place all the time. In this particular piece, I painted her skin the Mexican chocolate brown, which I'm very, very fond of. Her face is just beautiful. She has fabulous features. And on her back is a data set, which represents the fact that, the Latino college graduation rate grew by 40.6%. This is a recent happening for me. I generally created the Make 'em All Mexican images separate from the data work. But now I've decided to do sculptural data work where I actually superimpose a data set on a sculptural object. In this case, there's a mandalic form on the back of her, on her spine. In that particular drawing, that particular data set, there are 100 spaces, and I have painted 41 of those spaces the same chocolate, which means it's a data pictograph, and the design itself actually exemplifies the data that's being presented.
Yeah, and what about the victory artwork? I know that you really love the European culture, right? And what does the victory represent for you?
Well, I went to high school in Madrid, Spain, and I went to the University of Madrid for a time in Spain as well. I lived in Spain from the time, I began living in Spain when I was 14 years old, which are very much formative years for a young person. I also lived in Germany from about 3 to 5 years of age and spent a good time of my formation as a human being, 3 to 5 years of age, within the European culture. I was very fortunate to visit Rome, to visit the catacombs, to see the many of the cave paintings in Spain, to see many, many cathedrals and major museums and collections of art. Of course, all of these objects have their political point of view. It's hard to go to the London Museum of Art and History and to see much of Greece, of the Grecian gods there instead of in Greece. How did that happen? And all the political realities of that become a question and an answer. This particular statue, as we well know, is the Winged Victory. It's also called Winged Nike. It's Hellenistic from the 2nd century BC, and it is considered the most celebrated, one of the most celebrated sculptures in the world. It's very easy to find this sculpture anywhere. If you go on the internet, you can buy it from, I think you can buy it from MoMA, from the Met in New York. You can find it in all sizes. You can find it anywhere. It's easy to appropriate this object. So I was having difficulty finding Latin American images, so I took what I could. I took what I could find. And one of the pieces that I could find was the indelible Winged Victory. This is over 4 feet tall, and it's covered in car paint, which is a double entendre in the Latino car culture. You can see the beautiful writing on the bottom, which is very much indicative of car culture. And it's painted in the Mexican chocolate, the milk chocolate, once again. And once you painted it brown, then the question became, what does this mean? Just as you've asked me. I'm just getting objects and painting them brown, not asking myself any particular number of questions, just saying, oh, I found this, let's paint it brown. But once I painted it brown, of course, the question came up and the answer came with it. It's brown victory. It must be la victoria. It is our victory. In knowing ourselves, in knowing who we are, in understanding how other people see us, seeing our gifts as well as our weaknesses and faults as a community and as a culture, and working towards, you know, a better day, a greater day for us as a community and as people.
Yeah, Linda. And well, the connection with the next selection of artwork are part of the series, the Brown Dot Project. And can you tell us about your message in this particular artwork and your approach and connection with the community and the statistical data?
Well, So I painted about 200 objects brown in the Make 'em All Mexican series. I went crazy and bought $3,000 worth of pricey antiques and just went to town, making the president and Mickey Mouse and everybody else brown, all the movie stars, everyone. And in the back of my head, I knew I had to move to a next series. And in the back of my head, I thought, well, people would ask me, so what are you going to do next? So what are you going to do next? And I'd say, I'm keeping it brown. And in the back of my head, of course, I had the color. And for some reason, I had a dot. I asked myself the question, what would my work look like if I was a minimalist painter? I missed paper. I missed working with my hands. It means a great deal to me as a painter and a sculptor. So I began asking myself this question. And I began collecting data based on some comments that had been made by a colleague regarding the growing population, the growing Latino population, which we all know a great deal about. But unfortunately, our population is growing, but the numbers of Latinos in the professions, engineers, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, congressmen, senators, business owners, of Fortune 500 companies is not growing in the same growth, in the same levels, on the same levels. So I began to do the research of the data, and I had this brown dot in my head as a part of this question of being a minimalist. Well, maybe if I make big circles and just put them on the wall, I got this brown color, it's a brown dot, and they weren't mixing. Once again, it took almost 5 years to find this series. And one day I was in the art store where I get many of my ideas, and I saw architectural grid paper. Yeah. And I saw the architectural grid paper on the shelf and I went, oh my God, I could track data using these dots. And I bought some architectural grid paper and I went home and I think I made 15 the first day, 9 by 9 inches, that basically formulated imagery. It's data pictographs, once again, of dots on architectural grid paper that spoke about Los Angeles being 48.3% in 2015. This is the image here. And you could see me dotting in we included me dotting in this particular slideshow so that people could see that this is my hand that's counting dots. In this particular case, I did the math yesterday. There was, I didn't know all the math with this one yesterday. There's about 43,024 squares in this particular piece and about 1,800 dots. I think there's actually 2,283 dots. That number comes to mind very quickly. But what happens is I count the number of squares and then I multiply that by the percentage. And then I come up with the number of dots and then I dot the image so that the number of dots represents the actual fact itself.
Yeah, and well, Linda, I think your work always starts with a question, right? And
yes.
What it means to be a person of color in the United States? Of course, with humor, curiosity, and open feedback. And what is your formula in this work? For example, in the Brown Dot project, with the LA 48% and Latino high school rate growth pattern. For example, because in the same series, you are doing more abstract painting, but in another hand, you are working with face of Latinos, right?
Yes, I thought it would be interesting to go from the abstracted formula that look a lot like computer grids. They look a lot like architectural formula. They look a lot like weaving. So on the first brown dot piece that we saw, the 48.3%, I thought it might be fun to incorporate Latino portraits. And so I began searching once again, like I do for data, on the internet for Latino images, photographs of Latinos themselves. And I found very few. It was very frustrating to search the internet for Latino faces that weren't gangsters or models or movie stars, but rather people just living their everyday lives as Latinos in the 21st century. And so I took a photograph of this wonderful gentleman and altered it so that it was of a cerulean blue that is very familiar and similar to the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. superimposed a grid on it myself, and then drew 2 squares on it. And each square has 625 squares within it. So you see a blue line around the top square with the dots inside of it, and inside that square are 625 squares. In 1993, 61% of Latinos were graduating from high school, and that is represented by the bottom square, 61%, and it is 381 dots. The top square, once again, with 625 squares within it, represent the fact that in 2013, 78% of Latinos were graduating from high school in the United States, represented by 490 dots. If you take 625 and multiply that by 78%, you come up with 490 dots. So there's some mathematics that are involved in it. This data was gathered by the National Center of Education Statistics, and I looked it up this morning to verify this information because it's important that we look up who we are. 81% of Latinos in the United States are now graduating from high school. This is contrary to popular culture. This is contrary to urban myths that we're failing in high school, that we're uneducated workers, that we're not essential, that we don't have potential. Yes, we do. And our next potential is to go to college and to graduate from college, and then once again graduate from graduate school in higher degrees, or to become salesmen or entrepreneurs, to work in the tech industry, et cetera, et cetera. But I believe that this is a very hopeful image, and it shares information that Latinos need to know about themselves and that they need to share with the larger world.
Yeah, Linda, I am really interested in the next connection with the Portfolio Datos Sagrados, because you are continue to talk about this. And I can see this series with a lot of layer, a lot of information, not only an aesthetic experience, right? Because you are sharing knowledge and your commitment and transmit at the community a lot of information, and I think people can reflect with your work, right? And what is the place for the audience in these kind of pieces?
There's so many places to begin with this particular work. It takes the database pictograph out of the grid formula and puts it into a circular mandalic formula, which is reminiscent of many different kinds of ceramics that have been completed in traditional cultures all over the world. Some of them, I've made many of these of all sizes, even are very reminiscent of Renaissance tile work. They look a great deal like Tibetan sand paintings, religious sand paintings. And they even look like rugs that are made in Peru. With the alpaca in the circular formula. Many of them look like that. They have many different cultural points of reference. They are reminiscent of many different ways of looking at information and knowledge. And we all know that mandalic forms are exactly that. They are representations of information and knowledge. In this particular case, I love this data. 52% of US Latinos self-identify as mestizos. This information was taken from the Pew Charitable Trust, the Latino Initiative. And I highly suggest that if you're interested in data and what's really happening to the Latino community in the United States, that you look up the Pew Charitable Trust and the Latino Initiative to learn more. In this particular case, there are 112 spaces. If you multiply the number of spaces, I drew this formula out on the circular piece of paper, just using a ruler. There isn't any, I didn't project it on the wall. It's basically done with basic eyesight and mathematical knowledge of some kind, not very complex knowledge, but nonetheless to be able to make it look perfect. And I drew it, if you look very closely and intently at this piece, you'll see very light blue lines. So I draw it out on light blue lines, and there are 112 spaces, drawn spaces on this piece. And if you multiply that by 52%, then you come up with 58. So 58 of those 100 spaces are painted brown, representing the data that 52% of US Latinos self-identify as mestizo. It's kind of interesting because over 60% of the United States Latinos are Mexican. So this would make sense that 52% would self-identify as mestizo, because Mexicanos are mestizos, and that's how we see ourselves in many ways.
Exactly. Well, Linda, you are talking about the cultura, right? The culture, the heritage, the language, knowledge, and like a mantra, like a ritual, you are communicating a lot of information and realistic information during this special time, right?
Yes, and I really enjoy doing the study, and I find that it really focuses conversations with individuals in my community and outside of my community, so that we can understand more about who we are, and not live by what other people tell us we are, but to follow the data to find out exactly what we are accomplishing as a community in the United States, as a culture and a community within the United States. It's fascinating. And it's been very gratifying to find a way to be able to take that data and present it in a different way than the graphs. You know, like people represent things in pie charts, and they do them in bar graphs, and all these kinds of formulas that people are somehow or another not connected to and feel a little distant from. But once you make it into a picture of some kind, or an artistic, you translate it through the arts, if you will, then people seem to find it more palatable and more interesting and more reasonable, and I'm hoping that they'll follow their nose and go out and find out more about themselves. Overall, I think it's a wonderful way to begin to appreciate the culture, to appreciate the community, to appreciate each other and ourselves, and to not feel that we are decided upon by others. We are decided upon by ourselves.
Yeah. Yes, correct, Linda. And we can talk a little more about our next series about Elvis and Blanca Brown, right? And
Yes.
I would like to know how important is the presence of famous personalities and popular, iconic in this kind of work. Why, for example, do you decide to select these people?
You know, I can't emphasize it enough. I really don't decide to select. I find them in antique malls. This is what people will come to me and say, why don't you do Frank Sinatra? Do Frank Sinatra. I go, well, go out and find him. Go ahead, go to an antique mall, find Frank Sinatra, and I'll paint him brown. It's perfectly fine. Go find it. And when you start scouring antique malls to find things to repurpose, you'll see that it's very difficult to find interesting objects to repurpose and to make a statement with. Elvis is everywhere. I mean, you can find Elvis just about everywhere. He's totally an icon of American culture. He's the king of rock and roll. I mean, he is an international phenomenon. He was during his life, and he will continue to be, just like Madonna and Marilyn Monroe. They are icons for the world. And my joke, I think it's interesting to make pop culture brown, because then you can enter in the humor into this work. And the humor is a very interesting door to be able to begin discussing some interesting issues about the politics of color, class, culture, and power. These are very heady and heavy kinds of topics. So using a little bit of humor and being able to make a funny, so the children will laugh and adults will laugh, and then suddenly an interesting story, a heartfelt story about how an individual feels about being brown, what challenges that they faced, what sorrows they faced, what losses they faced because they're judged for being brown. In this particular case, I even repurposed one of my own paintings on the side with a lightning strike, because Elvis himself said that he believed he was struck by lightning, and that's where his powers and of creativity came from. But the joke here is that he makes a great Latino. He's so cute. You know, when I'm in an audience, I say, I'd date him, he's cute. And people are like, yeah. And I was very lucky to have a visit from Linda Ronstadt during my last exhibition. And I said, I wonder how the music world would have changed if Elvis would have been Mexican. And she said, tell me about it. So there's a lot of layers of the politics of society, the politics of money and power that play into this idea of turning history on its head. Turning rock and roll on its head, right? And of course, Mickey Mouse is, you got to make Mickey Mouse brown. I can't even imagine how many Latinos go to Disneyland every year when it was open, of course, and who will return when it's open again. I think 24% of all tickets sold in the movie theaters in the United States pre-COVID were Latino. They were purchased by Latinos, and we're only 17% of the population, but we go to the movies. We certainly spend a lot of money in entertainment in the United States, along with many other things. I read recently, studying the gross national product, that the Latinos in the United States and the amount of money that they spend here in the United States constitute the 7th largest economy in the world. In the world. What we spend is larger than the high majority of countries all over the world on their gross national product. We represent millions and millions of dollars, actually billions. I think it must be billions at that point. I have the data, and I'm going to be using lots of that data in my newest works for this year, along with, of course, information from the census. And the Pew Charitable Trust has just done a whole new area of research. So I'm going to be creating lots of new things regarding that. But I think pop culture needs to be a part of the conversation. I asked someone just yesterday, where's our Elvis? Where's our Ella Fitzgerald?
Yeah.
Where's our Louis Armstrong? Where's our Barbra Streisand? Where are ours? And is it possible for Latinos in the United States to channel American culture? And what are the difficulties in that? And why haven't we been able to do it?
Exactly. And what about the series that you have with a lot of pictures of famous people linking with Hollywood, with famous personalities? What is the idea behind this?
Well, I was very fortunate to be affiliated with UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center in Urtiaga, who invited me to have a solo exhibition at UCLA one year, and it was very successful. I enjoyed my experience with the center very much and continue to enjoy that relationship. And John was very kind to invite me. He challenged me one year, the year I think it was here, 2016, when there's a great deal of media regarding the lack of people of color in the Academy Awards as nominees, on the selection committee, in the audience, et cetera, in movies, in scripts, and everything. There was a great deal of publicity regarding that. And Sean invited me, or challenged me, as I said, to create a series of pieces surrounding Hollywood. And of course, I took several movie stars, including Audrey Hepburn, who I renamed as Aurora Hernandez. I took their initials and changed them into Latino names as a Latina. And the idea about this is really, once again, about power. And it's about fame, it's about power, it's about notoriety, it's about presence, it's about media presence. And the emotional underlying, the pin underneath this is that Latinos deserve to hold an award. They deserve to have the paparazzi take many photographs. They deserve to be lauded, and they deserve to be cherished. Many movie stars are highly cherished by the American culture, which they should be. I'm a big American movie buff. I love Turner Classic Movies. I watch it regularly. I study film. I really love it. It'd been the second thing I would have loved to have done, been in the movies, or at least been in the industry. And the one on the left is an interesting piece because it's Emilio El Indio Hernandez, that was his name. And he actually posed for the Oscar statuette, which very few people know that the body that was used to model Oscar was a Latino. And it seemed extremely important to bring this to the forefront. It seemed extremely important to say this, that we are present, that we have been present. My recent research tells me that we helped to build the railroads along with African Americans, Irish Americans, new immigrants, Mexicans, Mexican Americans, and Tejanos helped to build the railroads. That Latinos were a part of the Civil War. Puerto Ricanos, Cubanos, Mexicanos fought in the Civil War, mostly for the South out of Texas. But we were there and we were present. And I think it's time that we begin saying this out loud. We've been here and we have been contributing. We have contributed to American culture. We're not unskilled workers. We are essential workers that help to keep the American machine going, to help keep the American prosperity going. And we need to sort of just stand up and show the data, show images with grace and some sense of humor and some understanding and some love of many cultures, but just to stand up proudly and say, yeah, we're here, we're still working for all of us.
Yeah. Yes, it is true, Linda. And to finalize this amazing and interesting analysis of your work, I know the data and communication in your titles are really important in your production. The message is the core point of your artwork, right? Can you explain more to us about your methodology in this interesting process?
In gathering data and utilizing data?
Yes.
Oh, it's very tedious. It is very tedious. I spend hours on the computer digging data. And interestingly enough, I've been doing this now for 5 years. I believe my first data piece was made in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. The more data has come to light, especially through the Pew Charitable Trust, the Latino Initiative. A great deal of data has come to light. And now with the census, more data will come to light. But finding data, because you find a data that's not so good and data that's really exceptional. Over 60% of American women business owners are Latinas. Nobody seems to know that. No one's dug into this reservoir of information that seems to never end. You have to really enjoy research. You have to enjoy looking for it. Sometimes I'll print out an article that's 12 pages long, sit down with it with a highlighter and begin highlighting things and find many things that I would like to talk about or share with the larger community, the smaller and the larger. And sometimes I'll read that page and there won't be anything in it that is qualified to, that would qualify for making an artwork. So it's a very tedious process. It's much like working on a PhD or something, where you're just reading and reading and studying and studying. And I think I just printed out, 100 pages of information. Out of 100 pages, I came up with maybe 15 or 20 pages that actually had data graphs in it and data formats in it that I would consider interesting to include. As a matter of fact, I have something here.
Yeah.
I don't see it. Oh, here it is, right in front of me. This piece of data here, as an example, was put together by the Latino Donor Collaborative. Dr. Bautista, who is a friend of mine, sent this to me as a gift to be able to use it. And it's really about the national gross product, the gross national product, and how Latinos are affecting that. I think 33% of all Nissan sales in 2015 were Latino. We're buying cars too. So the first part of the process is to do all this research, to find something that's interesting. And then being able to, like I said, take that and translate it into an artistic process, which, as I've shared earlier in our conversation, it took me 5 years to find the gridded formula. It didn't take so long to find the circular formula. I just went to the art store and saw circular paper, and my brain went to work, and suddenly I was doing the graphs on circular paper. That was a pretty easy move. Now moving it from flat works into sculptural works and back and forth, it has been a little bit more challenging for me as an artist. But I find that I was a painter for many years. I painted basically nonstop from 1990 all the way to 2006. I was a painter and did a fantastic realism landscapes. And to find this conceptual formula has been a very far drop and an intellectual reckoning for me to find a new way to see work and to produce work. I call my process morphing. And I believe that you actually stack elements in a concept. You stack elements one on top of the other. So at this point, I started stacking repurposed with brown. And I came up with Make 'em All Mexican. Then I stacked repurposed with brown with geometrics and came up with the Brown Dot Project. Then I stacked circular paper on top of that and came up with a datos sagrados, a circular formula. And now I'm moving backwards into the sculpture and stacking them all together, including the data, the brown, the gridded formula, the sculpture, the paper, the flat works, and seeing what kinds of images I come from that. Being able to stack concept, information, and process together is, I think, one of the most challenging and most delightful aspects of being an artist. Making your brain work to come up with imagery and learning how to morph something into something else is something that keeps the creative process going, keeps it alive, and keeps it forever interesting.
Yeah. Wow, Linda, this is amazing. Thank you for your time. And well, we are ready to open the Q&A session with our audience. Jorge is the curatorial assistant, and he can share with you the question from our audience right now.
Hi, so if you haven't already, please feel free to send in your questions via the chat. But in the meantime, I will get started with one on my own. I think it really says something about the state of the US and its politics of desirability that your meme series and your Brown Belonging series is still so relevant and, you know, able to be connected to so many issues now. How does that make you feel? And how does that, how does that make you feel? And how do you see that changing in the future?
You know, I told myself, I generally give any suite of work 12 years. That seems to be my pattern. I'll work on something for 12 years and then I feel like I'm done. You know, I've said it, I've done the best that I could, and now it's time to morph it and to move on. And I don't know what happened, but I've been doing this now for 12 years. So I guess it's 10 years, 2010 to 2020, now 2011 years now. And the brown ideas just keep coming. I can't seem to stop them. I don't seem to tire of them. The audience doesn't seem to tire of them. The opportunities to exhibit the work don't seem to be stopping. The opportunities to publish the work and to speak about the work keep coming. More and more people are interested in talking about this particular subject. I think that the way that I've approached the subject is very new to many of my compatriots and many of my peers. I've approached it in a completely different formula. I mean, it's to do minimalist work as a Chicana of my generation is pretty rare. I think Linda Ariola is the only other minimalist that I know, geometric minimalist that I know. But she doesn't correlate data with her work. I think the superimposition or superimposing data on top of the work has made it even more relevant. And I find that the conversations never seem to end. And I have people crying, and I have people telling heartfelt stories of the past. I have people telling very hard stories of race hatred and prejudice. I have people telling stories of their youth and of their upbringing. It just doesn't seem to end. And I'm not going to force, as an artist, you can't force anything to end, and you never should. If it's coming, let it flow, because if you stop something, you could create a block. And artists, that's what artists fear more than anything, is a block. And I don't really suffer from blocks because I have many ideas on different little quadrants, and suddenly they just all kind of come together and spark up. And one day I go, oh, I know what I could do with that. I know what I could do with that. I'm enjoying it very much. I feel very gratified and very pleased. Of course, I'm very happy that MOLAA has taken interest in the work. I am very pleased to be working with Gabriela and yourself, and of course, Solimar and Lourdes Ramos and the board. I think that what I'm most surprised at is that, you know, I'm a Latina that was, or Latina Chicana, Indigenous, that, you know, spent a lot of time in Europe and some time in Mexico, but most of my life was spent in the United States. I'm an American. I'm third generation Californian. My father was born in Texas. Both of my grandmothers were born in Texas. I'm sure they were just brought across the border like a DACA and put in El Paso. But my orientation is a very different kind of orientation to art and to being Latino and Chicano. It's a very different, that's why I want to bring us all together. I have a very much international point of view. I love European culture as much as I love Mexicano culture. I love Mexicano culture just as much as I love Australian culture and Hawaiian culture. I can see the relationships between people and language. So I'm very pleased that I've been invited to represent, and that means a great deal to me, and that the conversations have been so heartfelt and the interest has been really passionate. It means a great deal to me personally. And I know that my parents are proud, and that means a lot to me too. My children are proud. That makes me happy too. My husband.
Sure.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Patrick Moore had two really interesting comments to share. He says, I recently spotted a vanity license plate called Mestisex, one of the 52%. And the second one was singer-songwriter Robert Allen Lopez, AKA Elvis.
Oh, wow, that's great. I've seen it pop around, you know. I think I hit it just about in time because now Disney is making brown characters, Barbie is making brown characters. I think that we're ready for this conversation, and I kind of been building up to it, and I have a large body of work where we can discuss this, but I think this is a really great time, and I love that license plate. That's really great. I wonder if they saw my piece and said, that's me. That's me. I really like that. It's wonderful to catch a wave. It's really wonderful to catch a wave. And spend 40 years swimming out to it is the interesting aspect of it. Spent 40 plus years swimming out to this peak, and then and the whole time going, I wonder what the image looks like. I wonder what the image looks like. I wonder what the image looks like. Where am I going? Where am I going? And suddenly, just like that. So I couldn't be happier if you told me I was 36 years old and baked me a cake.
Angela King also had an interesting comment to make. I think it's in reference to your Datos Sagrados work, where she says Alhambra tile work. I think she says it reminds her of that.
It does. When you take these circular formulas and divide them, they naturally become these ceramic tile style objects. They naturally become embroidery, they become beadwork, they become sand mandalic work, they become, I mean, if you've seen the Aboriginal people and the sand mandalas that they created in parts of their ceremonies, you look at them and you get chills. When you look at the pieces, you go, oh my God, that looks almost exactly like it. And you know that the interesting part about when you consider that is that mathematics is a great part of that. And you know, even taking the circular formula of the stars and the planets and the way that they divide the sky into pieces it creates another mandalic formula. This particular style covers many different aspects of culture, science, history, any number of medias, product. It's very fun the way that it's so universal, and yet I brought it all down to talking about Latinismo.
Definitely. There's a question from the audience that says, as someone that loves math and art, seeing how you fuse both fields into such beautiful and representative artworks that bring light to the field of statistics is always a joy. Have you considered how your work can be easily used and applied to STEM learning experiences at the K through 12 level?
I'm waiting for the invitation. I am waiting for that invitation. I've had 2 conversations with educators that have said, gee, would you consider? And I will always consider. I will always accept invitations to expand the work and to expand the conversation. I'm just waiting for a K through 12 or a pre-K 16 educators to come to me and say, why don't we incorporate this in some math classes? Why don't we incorporate this in some statistic classes? Why don't we use this kind of work to engage people who are afraid of statistics, to look at statistics or to study statistics? Now they're finally coming up with this whole idea, or I don't think they're coming up with it, but they're finally accepting the idea that arts improve mental health, that arts also are connected to mathematics, that music is connected to mathematics, that painting is connected to invention, where you have this, what my girlfriend calls a becoming space, where you don't really know what you're looking for as an inventor or as a scientist, and you're trying any number of formulas to be able to find a way to go. They're finally coming up with data to back this up, and you can actually look it up. again. And so, yes, I would love to do that. Invite me, and I will be sure to say yes.
Thanks. So those are all the questions from the audience. Thanks so much, everyone, for your comments.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Linda, for your generosity for this conversation. It was a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today, too. Thank you, Linda.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much again for your invitation. Thank you for allowing me some time to share my image, my process, and my hopes for the Latino community. It's meant so much.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon in our next Zoom project with the amazing artist, Rafa Esparza. Thank you, Linda. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.